Hello and welcome to The Rest is Money with me, Steph McGovern.
And with me, Robert Paston, and we're delighted to have one of our favourite guests, tax expert, all-round good egg, Dan Neidle, with us. And we were always keen to have you on because, you know, we've been preparing for this blooming budget for months. And the budget turns out to be even more... I mean, people use the word smorgasbord. Is smorgasbord the right way to describe the dizzying number of tax changes?
No. A smorgasbord's this elegant Scandinavian thing of neatly arranged morsels that you eat in a particular order. This is a mad Las Vegas buffet where someone walks around drunkenly, grabs stuff randomly, shoves it on the plate. It's not a
and with our mad, I suppose the question we want to ask you in general is, given that it is a mad Las Vegas buffet, how much of what we eat tonight is going to make us sick?
Well, the good news is you're eating very little tonight, but in 2029, you're getting stuffed.
I love this analogy. But that point about this is the backloading we were talking about, isn't it? What are your thoughts on that, Dan, and the fact that a lot of these tax rises come in so far into the term?
So I go back and forth on this. One possibility is that it's simply the way the OBR scoring worked, and this is how it adds up.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, that doesn't make sense to me.
She decided what she wanted to spend. The OBR calculations, projections meant the headroom. That plus her headroom means she needed to raise tax in a certain way. And that profile happened to end up looking like this. So this is the result rather than the cause. But I think that's probably wrong. I think probably the reason is simpler. That once you've ruled out increasing individual taxes, which they've done, you're left with complicated technical changes and complicated new taxes, and those take time. People forget how long it takes to create a new tax. Sugar tax, super easy tax paid by about a dozen companies, took 2 years to come in. So that's why we're seeing mansion tax taking years to come in. That's why we're seeing the salary sacrifice not going to be in until 2029.
Electric vehicles as well is another really tricky one to work out how you're going to do it.
Exactly. It's another consequence of their foolish promises during the election that even if they wanted to raise lots of tax now, they kind of can't.
Let's just talk about something like this reform to the tax or national insurance status of pension contributions, these salary sacrifice schemes. Why can't you just say to companies, by the way, as of next April, you're going to be charged national. I don't understand why that one is regarded as so complicated. But broadly, they're simply saying national insurance will be charged on pension contributions if you go the salary sacrifice route. I mean, that seems really easy. Why don't you just do it?
It does, doesn't it? And my immediate reaction when I saw it is, they've deliberately pushed that out for political reasons. But asking around, it seems that the payroll stuff really is very complicated. Lots of ancient computer systems need to be creaked into gear and changed, and it does take a long time. So apparently that is real.
Yeah, there's loads of other things coming in for businesses as well at the minute with like making tax digital and how you can understand that you can't just do a switch and everything changes for them.
But this one's complicated by two things. That it's you're going to have £2,000 a year. But what happens if you change jobs in the middle of the year, as I guess most people will? How does your new employer find out what your inherited maximum is? And the second complication is if you end up contributing too much, if that happens with income tax, so you make too big an income tax, too big a pension contribution, then it can be corrected in your self-assessment. There's no such thing as national insurance self-assessment. Your employer has to do it. And all this makes it complicated.
And then there's the other point, which I'm gripped by, which is if people continue to have their contributions paid by companies on their behalf, as they do under the salary sacrifice approach, and that then incurs national insurance. What about more conventional pension arrangements? How do you how on earth can you force companies to pay national insurance on one set of pension contributions and not on all the other pension contributions they make for employees who are not in salary sacrifice schemes.
It is super weird. It's super weird. Imagine Robert working for a company where they make a 6% pension contribution a year, deductible for national insurance purposes. Steph works for a company that makes 8%. Robert decides he's going to make another 2% contribution this year by salary sacrifice. No. No national insurance deduction for that, even though it would just put him in the same position as Steph. So they'll have to distinguish, I expect, between what's in your employment contract and what's a discretionary top-up.
To understand that then, does that mean you could formally reduce the amount you put in a salary sacrifice and then top it up yourself to avoid the national insurance on the greater amount?
No, because once salary sacrifice goes, you'll still be able to make pension top-ups yourself, or indeed get a SIP, put money in the SIP, but you don't get a national insurance deduction for that. That's with your post-national insurance wages.
The reason the salary sacrifice was so efficient is because companies do not make national insurance contributions on their pension contributions. So the way that it's sort of, I always thought it looked a bit like a scam, except HMRC accepted it. Broadly, there was this sort of weird situation where you would basically say, rather than the employee making a pension contribution, the amount they would have put in would be put in by their company. And at that point, there's no national insurance liability. Whereas if the employee had put the money in, there would have been a national insurance liability. Do you see that? Do you see the issue?
And that's, for an employee, that's a saving of 2% if they're a higher additional rate payer, 8% if they're a basic rate payer. But for the employer, it's 15% employer national insurance, which is big money.
Yeah.
And as we keep saying, Dan, what are your thoughts on it encouraging people to save less, though? Because they just think, well, I'm not getting the tax incentive, so what's the point?
I mean, at the margins, that must be right. I'm not sure that's a macro problem, because if you're someone for whom salary sacrifice is available, then by definition, you're working for a fairly big firm that will have a pension for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that this is the one of the deferred tax increases where I really wonder whether when it comes to it, it'll actually be implemented. Because, this is a genuine tax, effectively on, Keir Starmer's favourite group of people, the working people. Are they really going to put that in around the time of a general election? I mean, that just is nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, but if they don't, they will then need to find in 29-30 about 5 billion quid, which is real money.
Can I ask you a bit about the council tax surcharge, Dan? Because this is just to remind everyone, this is to be applied to homes worth more than £2 million coming in from April 2028. I saw on Twitter you were suggesting maybe it's a good idea. Is that fair, or it's probably you've probably got a lot to say on this?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think it's wrong that someone in a £100 million penthouse pays the same council tax as someone in a £2 million flat, or indeed someone in a £100 million penthouse only pays twice as much as someone in a mathematically average house. So that's wrong, and it makes sense to have more council tax bands. Problem is, council tax is based off 1991 valuations. Politicians are terrified of revaluation, so they can't just add more bands. They've had to create something new and different on top of council tax.
The interesting thing about council tax as well is that, the argument can sometimes be, well, hang on, it's about the services you get. And, I don't have more bins than somebody with a much cheaper home, but it's much more than that, isn't it? This money, a lot of it goes into social care. So it feels right that people who've got assets worth more money should contribute more to social care.
Yeah, I mean, council tax just doesn't do what it used to do, and what I think I always assumed it did. It doesn't much pay for local services. About 3/4 of it is about social care. Quite how we've ended up in the position that something that should be nationally funded and run is run by councils and funded by council tax, I have no clue. Like I said, that's Robert's territory.
But the other thing about this kind of home's worth more than 2 million, it then stops at 5 million, doesn't it? So if you've got a house that's worth 20 million or whatever else, then you're only paying the same as someone who's got a 5 million home. I mean, literally anyone who's got a home worth over £2 million has got a lot of money. But that there's a big disparity there at the other end of the really rich, isn't there?
I think we could easily be into a sort of situation where it's, the opposite of the grass is always greener. I think there are lots of parts of the world where, literally next to each other, you get roads where houses are definitely over 2 million. And then next to them, there are roads that look quite similar, but for reasons that are never quite clear, the value is under 2 million. And you could just imagine, that the inhabitants of one of those roads sort of basically either belly aching to the valuers or trying to shop their neighbours about the extension they put on the back, which maybe has been done illegally. You know what I mean? It's going to be this is going to drive communities apart, in my view.
Yeah. Also, already I've noticed, because I love a good look on the old Rightmove for a bit of property porn, and already you've seen those kind of properties that were around the 2 million mark suddenly go down to like 1.7,
Really?
1.8. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is, if there's any economist PhD students listening, this is your chance, boys and girls. Someone should look at what happened on Rightmove the day before, the day after the budget.
In a rational world, right, what should happen is when you are absolutely firmly, let's say, in the 2 to 2.5 million category, and there's no dispute about it, presumably the price of that property should be reduced by, I don't know, you just look at the stream of payments over the next 30 years and you discount them, and you just take the money off the sale price for the additional council tax you'll have to pay in real terms. Isn't that right? Isn't that what should happen in a rational world?
If I'm a human calculating machine, then when I buy a £5 million house, I should be doing a net present value calculation on that stream of 7,500 payments. Exactly. Depending on where my discount value is, that means the value of the £5 million house has dropped by between 200 and 300,000. But people don't necessarily behave like that, particularly if I'm buying a £5 million house, I'm paying £500,000 of stamp duty. If I'm paying £500,000 of stamp duty, am I really going to spend a second thinking about a £7,500 bill? Don't know. Again, it's something economists will have lots of fun looking at.
It's a really interesting question, but it could also drive up the price of properties just below the threshold so that they remain just below the threshold. Because, if you're thinking that you can't afford the increment, the new so-called mansion tax, but you want a house in the same area that's sort of similar, you might be prepared to pay a bit more for the sort of cheaper house that doesn't quite get you into the mansion tax category. I mean, I don't think that, you could, the cash flow calculation could work in a positive rather than a negative basis, if you see what I mean.
This is all melting my head now.
Yeah, so I'm melted too. That's both interesting and mad.
Yeah, but think about it. Think about human nature. Think about human nature. You would be prepared to pay for a bit more for a property that doesn't incur the mansion tax, if you see what I mean, but is similar to the one that does.
Pay extra for this house.
Yeah.
But why would you pay more for it?
Why? Because it's a similar property to the one down the road that's just over, but you don't incur the mansion tax. You pay up to the 2 million or you pay up to the 2.5 million, because there'll be people who will want a property that doesn't quite tip over.
Mm.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I that seems rational to me. Maybe
my head's too melted by that. I'm going to refuse to respond.
We'll get somebody cleverer than you on then, Dan.
That sounds a great idea.
If that's possible. I'm not sure that is possible.
Dan, what's the thing that stood out to you most, that you feel the kind of most strongly on?
I'm going to slightly also tweak that, which is, when I talked to you about it on the day, the thing that you were most angry about was no radical reform. Are you still angry about that?
Yeah, I am angry. We've got a government that says they're committed to growth. We've now had 2 budgets with no pro-growth tax reform. There are so many things you could do, and they needn't even cost any money. You could reform VAT. You could fix the ridiculously small VAT base and cut the rate at the same time. Wouldn't cost anything. You could reform capital gains tax so the super rich pay more, and yet there's more incentive for proper long-term investment. Reform corporation tax, stop it being so bloody complicated. Reform income tax, stop the marginal rates that deter growth, that put people off working, and so on and so on and so on. Nothing.
I mean, I think one of the things you also pointed out, I think it was you, that one of the extreme consequences of freezing thresholds is once you are firmly in the 45% band, right, it's just irrelevant. It's, it's sort of progressive up to the point where you're very rich, at which point it's irrelevant.
Well, but that is the story of the last 15 years, really. If you look at, all these people angry with the government need to think about what's been happening for a long time now. The 40% higher rate threshold's fallen by £18,000 in real terms since 2010. £18,000. The number of taxpayers paying the higher rate doubled. The number paying the additional rate quadrupled. The rate of stamp duty tripled. Pension tax relief cut. Child benefit restricted. Marginal rates of 60% or more. All of this under a Conservative government. So it's a weird kind of progressive taxation that's much higher tax on the top 10%, but it kind of leaves the 0.1% unscathed. If you're earning £1 million, you could care less about where these thresholds are. And Labour, whilst you might think they'd have cared a bit more about the working 10% and wanted to put more tax on the top 0.1%, no sign of it.
Yeah. The thing that I am a bit obsessed about at the minute with the retail business I have, Dan, is business rates and how complicated they are. Because obviously coming out of COVID, we had the whole 100% relief for retail and hospitality businesses. And then that has been kind of tapered down. And then last year it was cut again. And it's the relief's at about 40% of rates. And then it's now changing again, but it's so complicated. It's the thing that seems to be keeping my business partners awake at night is trying to work out what our business rates are going to be, because they are getting more expensive at a time when, there's a cost of living crisis and a lot of pressure on people when it comes to retail and hospitality. What's your thoughts on business rates?
It's absurdly complicated, counterintuitive, and doesn't seem to be properly explained anywhere that I can see. So we've got at least 4 different things happening. The first thing, everyone who works in retail or owns business property will know this, but it's maybe a surprise to other people. Business rates work as a percentage of the rateable value, a percentage of the amount that a property would pay in rent on the open market. But every so often they do a revaluation. The revaluation is on a particular date. So the last revaluation was in 2023. The valuation date was 1st April 2021. That was 2 weeks after people went back to school. So rents were super low. So although not many people in small business are jumping up and down and clapping about it, business rates have been artificially low ever since because they've been based off this low valuation. Now, this year, we have another revaluation. And it takes effect from April next year, but it's looking at rents in 1st of April 2024. Well, by 2024, COVID was ancient history. Rents are normal. So suddenly we'll have an increase from COVID era rates to normal rents. And that could triple rateable values in some cases. That's the first thing that's going on. A super big increase that isn't you can't really blame the government for it. And it's a return to normalcy, really. But if you're a business looking at that, it means that on the face of it, your business rates triple overnight. So that's the first thing. And it's already taken me a long time. Second thing, if anyone's still listening to this, is because that's clearly a big problem, there's a transitional relief. And that says that when it comes to the 1st of April, they'll cap your increase to either £800 or, if greater, 25% of the increase. So whilst on paper you might think your rates are trebling, actually they won't go up more than 25%. And there's another transitional limit the year after that, another year after that. But let's be real. After 3 years or so, you will be at that tripling point. So then we've got the third thing, which is there's a supporting small business scheme from April.
Yes, small business rate relief. Yeah.
And then the fourth thing, new lower rates for retail, hospitality and leisure, which is funded by higher rates than everyone else. So none of this stuff is raising money for the government. It's all kind of broadly neutral. And it's a bit of a shuffling around, but they ended up increasing rates less for big business, which means a smaller reduction for small business. So that's 4 things. The rental values go up, transitional relief, supporting retail business, supporting small business, and retail hospitality and leisure lower rates. Put them all together. What have you got? Don't know, but I need to make some pretty charts so I understand this.
Just that in the context of what I'm doing at the minute, because I've got a new business that we're opening in Newcastle soon, and we cannot forecast the rate. Like, it's so impossible to work out what our costs are going to be on the basis of business rates being so complicated, because it is a big chunk of money, especially as a new business, when you're not sure yet how much you're going to, when you're trying to forecast everything. It's really hard if that rate is so variable.
This is something that policymakers just don't get, that for business, the rate of a tax is sometimes not the most important thing, but having certainty as to what
yes,
is
exactly.
critical, because you need to be able to plan. If someone told you your rates are £100,000 a year, you'd work it out, you'd take the property, take a different property, put it in your business plan, you'd do the deal or not do the deal. Fine. But if you genuinely don't know if they're going to be £50,000 or £150,000, you can't. And too much of our tax system has so much change, so much complexity, so much uncertainty, that it makes it very hard to plan. And that's the issue if you're a coffee shop. It's also an issue if you're a foreign sovereign wealth fund looking to invest $1 billion into the UK. Uncertainty is the killer.
Yeah. And just to widen it out as well, if you're looking at high streets in terms of, the kind of, we've seen the fall of the high street in a way, in terms of lots of empty shops and things like that. It makes it really difficult for any new business people to try and reinvigorate a high street, because it's really impossible to work out costs and things. So it's not great for, the government's big plans to try and, make us more prosperous, if that's what they want to do. Anyway, should we look at some of the other things, Robert? What else are you wanting to pick Dan's brain on?
Well, we haven't really talked about these ISA reforms. I mean, I personally have never been in favour of tax breaks for cash savings. I mean, I happen to think, essentially, because on the whole, people who've got 20 grand's worth of savings per year typically are quite well off anyway. It's not at all clear to me why you want to subsidise essentially handing over cash to banks and building societies in that way. The origin of ISAs were, I think, personal equity plans, which were a Tory invention, I think, from the 1990s.
80s.
Was it 80s? It was Thatcher.
Nigel Lawson, yeah.
Okay, it was Lawson. Okay, it was Thatcher and Lawson. And I'm pretty sure that when they started, they did what the name said, and they were tax inducements to invest in the stock market. I don't think they started as tax inducements to, save cash at a bank.
Correct.
And that always struck me as being a worthwhile form of subsidy, as it were, because I think it is good to encourage people to invest in assets that can increase in value over time, and it's also good for businesses to have retail money going into them. Might reduce the cost of capital for businesses a bit. Just in general, I regarded that as a sensible initiative. I think it was under Brown that it became a much broader wrapper, and you were allowed to put the money into either shares or cash. My own, preference would have been, again, to get back to your point about, wish that you wish the chancellor had been a bit more radical. I think the radical reform would have simply been to say, if you want to save 20,000 and you want to get the tax breaks, it's got to go into the stock market. But she didn't. She's saying that only 8,000 has to go into the stock market, unless you're retired, in which case the whole 20 can still go into cash. But for most people, the cash maximum is 12. And, I don't know why you need to have a tax incentive to put money in the bank. Just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, just to the thing I don't disagree on I don't think we need 20 grand, tax-free cash savings, because you're right. Anyone who can afford to put that much money into savings every year would be pretty well off anyway. My issue is the motive for doing it. For me, I think would have been fine, reduce the cash ISA limit, but we just need some type of more education around what risk is and how you can invest and what it actually means. Because, this is only anecdotally, but everyone who talks to me about where they should put their money say, oh no, stocks and shares, I don't want to lose it all. And it's like and even though if I get a chart out going, well, historically, if you look at the FTSE 100, it's outperformed, blah, blah, they don't care. They just go, no, you might lose it all. So it's that. Yeah. I think that's a bigger problem.
And they don't realise they lost 20% and then 15% during the pandemic years from inflation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The problem we've got, and this again goes back to the lack of bravery. On the one hand, one of the reasons she backed off was because the building societies in particular warned her that they had become too dependent on cash from this sort.
I disapprove of that kind of lobbying so strongly.
Yeah, but that's what happened.
So our tax dollars are providing a hidden subsidy to building societies.
That is what she was warned, and that's one reason why she backed off. And the other reason she backed off is, and we've seen a bit of this because the Daily Mail, I think, has had a bit of a go over these reforms in advance of them being, in advance of them being announced. She was very, very worried that, in particular, older people who have got a lot of cash in ISAs would get very angry. And it's one of the reasons why older people, retired people, can still invest the full 20 grand. This goes to the heart of the greatest part of all parties' cowardice, actually, with the sort of exception of reform, actually, weirdly. But both the Tories and Labour are way too frightened to have any kind of public conversation about the one part of government spending that is way out of control, which is spending on the basic state pension and other financial support for older people, which is rising. There's a 30 just in the course of the 5 years covered by the latest OBR report. It's rising by £35 billion financial support for older people. And if you look at the OBR's longer term projections, it is support via the triple lock that is going to, and other financial support for older people, which is going to bankrupt Britain. And yet the only party that is prepared to even talk about possible reform of the triple lock is Reform.
And Labour's making it worse, because we had that interview yesterday with the Chancellor, I think, when she was suggesting that pensioners wouldn't pay any tax even when their pension grew beyond the personal allowance.
Oh, you're right. It was that was shocking. You see, she went on another ITV show, Martin Lewis, and it was it was really extraordinary that she said that in 2028 on current projections, given the freezing of income tax thresholds, at that point, older people on the state pension might have to pay a bit of tax. And she said, don't worry, none of you will pay any tax. And you're just thinking, but this is mad.
It's like a throwaway sentence is going to cost the country billions and probably create an anomalous marginal rate at the point that a pensioner starts getting other income.
Let's pick up in just a couple of minutes after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Google. Now, if you ran a small business, what would you do with an extra 3 weeks a year? That's how much time the average small business could save with AI, according to Google's latest AI Works report. 3 weeks isn't spare time, it's the ability to get the day-to-day done faster, giving you time to plan for the future. So why aren't more people using AI? Google's research found it's mainly a lack of training and confidence. That's why they launched AI Works, a people-first training pilot that helps small business workers understand how they can use AI tools like Google Gemini to do more. In a matter of hours, people were using AI as a super assistant, instantly unlocking productivity gains. They were using it to write documents, crunch numbers, brainstorm, and even role-play new business ideas. If every SME in the UK gained those 3 weeks, that's a serious lift to job satisfaction, innovation, and national productivity. Just one example of how Google's AI is fueling growth and transformation. Find out more at google.com/AIworks. Can I ask, what do you think of the electric vehicle tax and how that might work, Dan, and whether that's a good idea, because I've got an electric vehicle and I cannot get my head around how this is going to work.
I mean, there was a long-term problem which the previous government ducked of what you do about the about 24 billion of revenue from petrol duty, when half of that is going to go up in, I guess not smoke, the opposite of smoke, go up in sparks within a few years. And the good thing to do would be road pricing. So you have a tax which is linked to how much you drive, when you drive, and where you drive it. So drive in London, peak times, get charged loads. Drive in the wilds of Norfolk, where I am, at midnight, get charged not much. And that's an economically efficient, sensible tax. It would, however, require an IT build. It would require a way of tracking the miles people drive in a secure way that doesn't ever reveal where they were. Who trusts government to do the IT build and the privacy thing?
Actually, as it happens, I am slightly unusual. I just think there are so many now big organisations that know where we are. Even when you turn off all the trackers on your phone, I'm afraid the idea that good and bad people who want to find us can't find it was the GPS, digital, all the rest of it. We are no longer the private citizens that we hope to be.
So they didn't do that.
Yeah, because we can't even get the infrastructure good enough yet for electric vehicles, really. You still get range fear quite often when you go on any long journeys on the basis of not being able to find a charger that works. And I know things are improving, so I don't see how we're going to get to a level where they can even, build the infrastructure to be able to achieve all this. It just...
But the good news is they're doing it in a way that requires no infrastructure. So how it works is you come to pay your vehicle duty for the year. You will estimate how many miles you drive, and you'll pay duty on that basis. Then next year, you'll type in your odometer, and there'll be like a catch-up payment. If you underpaid, you'll have to pay more. And if you overpaid, you'll get a refund. And you'll be reporting yourself, no little box in your car reporting on you, no privacy implications. If you cheat, then your MOT garage will snitch on you. And during the first 3 years that you have a new car when there's no MOT, there'll be new mini MOTs paid for by the government so they can check and snitch on you.
Oh, wow. So basically, when you go and get your MOT, they'll type into some database the actual mileage, and then they'll do some type of comparison, and then they'll know.
And I can't remember where I read or heard somewhere that they're reviewing the rules around criminal offences about odometers, because the obvious thing that will happen is lots of people spending 10 quid on Chinese websites to buy devices that zero their odometer. So I expect they'll make it that if you do that, your car gets thrown at the bottom of the Thames.
Yeah. That always makes me just think of Matilda and, the dad who used to turn back the mileage on cars that that was his dodgy side hustle. So that's interesting, because that does sound much more straightforward then.
It is, but it's compromised. It's kind of a slight hallmark of this budget. There's a thing they wanted to do which was absolutely good and made sense, but kind of didn't want to have the political hassle, the practical hassle. So they've done something else which, works, but it's not road pricing. It doesn't have the economic benefit of road pricing.
And also one of my arguments against it is I think it further divides the nation in the sense of it's going to cost a lot more in the north, isn't it? And in the places, rural areas, and where there's a real serious lack of infrastructure. And if people
Absolutely.
so that it kind of plays into that problem of the divide.
Which road pricing wouldn't do, because road pricing would recognise that there's not much externality, not much harm of me driving across an empty field in Norfolk, and there is if I drive an enormous Land Rover through Chelsea at 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah, but there is a sort of middle ground, and this is the bit which I do think is absolutely nuts, right? Which is, I do sort of get the anxiety about road pricing where you're being tracked through GPS, but I mean, it's just weird that they're not, twice a year taking a reading from the car, automatically over the mobile network. It would be so easy to do.
Yeah, and I wondered if there's a middle ground here, that they could go with what they're planning. They could give you the option of installing a box in your car, not made by the government, but the government could certify devices made by third parties, which you'd pay, I don't know, 10 quid a month for, and would mean you don't have the hassle of checking and reporting your mileage.
I don't even think you'd have to put a box in. I imagine with most EVs, there's simply a software upgrade that they could do to the existing system, and it would just automatically happen.
That requires government to build a system that links into all the different EVs. I'm sceptical about government's ability to do that.
No, all right, that seems perfectly reasonable. What have we missed, Steph?
I mean, I don't know if there are any big thoughts on any of the other things, like, I guess, online gambling levy, that's all fair, isn't it? And tobacco duty and things like that.
The thing about online gambling levy, it's I cannot work out why they've been so timid. I mean, that is another example where the big companies have sort of basically threatened to move abroad and,
drives me nuts, that one. Sorry, I'm going to be grumpy again. So if we're about to impose a tax on, I don't know, widget makers, you'd say, well, hang on, we want widget makers. You don't want to discourage widget makers. It's a valuable part of the economy. But gambling, if we impose a tax on gambling businesses and they close down, the economy is close to full capacity. The jobs and investment isn't going to go up in smoke. It's going to go somewhere else. It's going to go to a business that we actually want, that makes something, that builds something, and that doesn't cause the harm that gambling does. So it's going to damage our business. It's not a negative to me.
Yeah, but then you could say that about pubs and things, couldn't you? And when does it end?
No, pubs are good. Pubs are good.
Well, yeah, but you could say a bit of like gambling isn't a bad thing either. It's just when it's dangerous.
The scale of these companies, I think, is way beyond light gambling, and most of their money is made from the people who are absolutely not light gamblers.
Yeah. So it's hard to defend them, obviously, but I guess it's just
I am a light gambler, very light gambler, but yeah, I don't think gambling is evil in the Calvinist sense. But I also don't think government should listen for a second to lobbyists from the gambling industry.
Yeah.
Which they have done.
Yeah. The only other thing I was just going to mention as well, but you might have more, Robert, was just like on fuel duty. Obviously, that's been frozen again. Is that just in it forevermore going to be frozen?
For the last forever, each budget promises that fuel duty will go up, but not now. They've promised it'll go up a bit sooner, but not now. So I wouldn't really bank that.
No, you can't bank it at all. I'm sure they won't do it.
But the reason is the fuel protest from back in 2001, isn't it? Was it 2000 or 2001? The government's absolutely terrified of fuel protests.
Well, as you say, there have been many occasions where, particularly some of our leading newspapers have decided to campaign on behalf of motorists, and governments always back down.
And can I just ask, we've talked a bit about retail, about any thoughts on the small parcel tax, this kind of loophole that's been closed for things worth, is it under £135? So parcels from overseas now will have to pay customs duty.
I don't know what I think. I've got two views, and I'm not sure which to pick. First view is it's a waste of everyone's time to charge duty on small items, because the admin cost will be way more than the duty. You're talking sort of £12 or more admin cost on potentially a £10 item. So it just makes sense to have a simple rule. Flip side of that is, yes, okay, but this has been industrially exploited by some, in particular, Chinese businesses, and that's unfair competition for British businesses.
Yeah, particularly when it's high street versus online. That they're the retailers who've been calling for this, haven't they, to make it fairer? So, but do you think it's just not worth the burden?
I don't know. I don't know how those two things play out. I'm going to duck it.
I mean, it does represent quite a big ideological shift by, a British government, in the sense that historically, and this has been true for, I'd say, about 30 years now, governments have taken the view that putting up prices to consumers should be avoided unless there's an absolute, on the whole, British governments have sided with the consumer rather than the business, right? And it is interesting to me. This is an example of a government saying, actually, we want to protect British businesses, and maybe this will be, maybe this will lead to other sort of interesting, slightly more what you might call patriotic shifts, but it is a shift.
Well, Dan, as ever, thank you for taking us through the workings of your brain on all of these different tax implications. As ever, we love chatting to you about all this, don't we, Robert?
We do. Hugely illuminating. So till the next crisis.
Can't wait, guys. Remember, we're just in the pre-budget crisis at the moment.
Yes. Okay.
Only another 360 odd sleeps to the next one.
Start the rumours now.
Oh God, I know. Don't. Right. Have a nice life, everyone, until we speak to you next.
That's a bit final.
That was too dramatic. Anyway, all the best. See you soon.
Bye-bye.